Hi everyone! Welcome to another video. Today's video I'm going to be reviewing Bridgerton Season 2, which I've just binge watched this past week. It made me reread the book again. I've already read the first 3 books of the series and I am obsessed. I'm fully in my Regency historical era romance mood and I'm in love. And I was so excited for this season 2 because Kate and Anthony were my favorite couple from the books. I love a good enemies to lovers plotline, and I think the show this season was really great for me. So I'm going to talk about some of the changes, some of the differences between, season 1, season 2, book versus show, some of my favorite things of this season, some of my things that I didn't love this season, talking about the costumes, and just kind of an overall review of the show, as well as my hopes and predictions for season 3 and continuing in the future. And one thing I have to say, in even all the critiques that I've been reading with interviews or watching online, or even my own thoughts around the show, especially in the realm of not staying true to history or not staying true to the book plot, is that for me, regardless of any place where I think, oh, they could have done better here, oh, I wish they'd done this here, the show for me really has maybe emotional at some points, in that I am a huge fan of historical romance, Regency loves, romance in general. I love that genre in books. I love rom-coms, and I think that a lot of times those are kind of diminished as girly interests and not really given the love to carry those stories to a big budget show like this. And also just being a fan of, Jane Austen and that universe and all of those adaptations in the Regency world with the movies. I've loved those things for a long time and never ever did I even think to try to envision myself in them. I love these stories and I never even thought, to see myself in them. And so that is one thing that truly what Bridgerton is doing and what I think it will continue to do is huge, and I'm so excited to see what they do down the line. So yeah, let's get into the review. But first, if you love my little cute top that's kind of Empire waist, Regency inspired, diamond of the season type vibe, I actually made this and you can see it in the last video that I posted here. So yeah, let's get into the review. Okay, so let's first talk about book versus show.
Okay, so let's get straight into the book timeline. So to start off in the prologue, we get set up with Edmund's death, all the trauma that comes with that for Anthony, losing his father, having to step into the parent role at such a young age, watching his mother be absolutely devastated. And also a big part of this too that isn't shown as much in the show is that Anthony believes he's going to die young because of this. He can't imagine himself outliving his father because he was such a great man, such a great husband, such a great father, that Anthony's convinced that he's going to die young, and that impacts a lot of his views around love and marriage. So then we get to, time jump, Sheffield's arriving into London for the season. They're not an impoverished family, but they're definitely kind of counting on this year to marry well, to be able to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Edwina is named the Diamond of the Season, and Kate is kind of seen as her borderline spinster sister, almost like taming of the shrew of that, the young pretty one, and then Kate is just kind of there. And her focus is really all on Edwina marrying. She's not looking for her own match. She's not looking for love herself. She wants all happiness to go towards her younger sister. Kate also has an immediate dislike of Anthony because of the rumors in Lady Whistledown naming him a rake. So then everybody meets at the Heartside Ball. Kate and Anthony end up dancing together, and it's very funny because both Edwina and Colin both say to Kate and Anthony respectively, oh, you remind me of my sibling, or oh, that's something that my sibling would do. And so everyone around them really from the jump sees how similar they are, but they obviously start off as enemies. So this dislike is kind of declared, but Anthony, also loving a challenge, almost is like, I'm gonna court Edwina because she's a diamond, but also we know internally it's kind of like just to spite Kate. So their enemies, match kind of goes on from there. So he starts courting Edwina, but then we get to Lady Bridgerton's musical. And so this is a big night in that Kate and Mary end up going to this Bridgerton event without Edwina because she's gotten sick. And Kate and Anthony end up kissing that night. She's trying to hide in his office again because he's kind of flirting with an opera singer from the musical. And she's like, oh, I don't want him to see me. I don't want to talk to him. Ends up being in the exact room that they come into. They end up kissing, but they get in a big fight because Anthony is still like, oh, I don't care about feelings. One, I'm denying the feelings that I feel for Kate, this obvious attraction. And yeah, I'm still going to date her sister because that's what I've decided and that's what I'm going to do. And Kate, of course, is like, there's no way you're going to be with my sister at all. So big fight, but also big steamy moment. And that leads us to getting to Aubrey Hall, where again, we have the amazing Pall Mall scene, Bridgerton family playing together. And it's another great moment of seeing how well Kate fits in with the Bridgertons, how she's really meant to be one of them. This scene also kind of highlights Kate's fears. So one night at Aubrey Hall, there's a big, terrible storm, and Kate has a very deep fear of that linked to her mother's death. And Anthony kind of comforts her through that. They have this bonding moment of both of them having these, outwardly kind of irrational, ridiculous fears that are rooted in very serious trauma to them because of their parents' death. Then we get the iconic bee scene where Kate is stung by a bee, which again connects back to Anthony's trauma of his dad dying by a bee sting. He's absolutely stressed out, thinks that Kate is going to die in front of him, and decides to suck the bee venom out of her sting, which, is a little provocative. And then their mothers and Lady Featherington stumble upon them in the garden where this is happening. They're like, oh, you gotta marry her now. This is a compromising situation. So they get married. Also to say, Edwina is fine with this. She's like, yeah, I like you guys together. So we get into married life where a lot of the story continues, focusing on them kind of figuring themselves out, obviously having attraction for each other and caring for each other, but not really wanting to fully go into those feelings. Kate still kind of feels like, the less pretty sister, and doesn't feel like she'll measure up as a wife in the same way as Edwina would have. And Anthony is still like, yeah, oh, I really like her. This marriage turned out well, but I can't love this girl because I decided not to love anybody. So then basically, end of the story, we get they finally admit their love to each other. They also conquer some of those fears from their childhood, and they live happily ever after, and we love to see it. Okay, so we start off with the Sharmas arriving to London as guests of Lady Danbury, and the mother, Lady Mary, she left London when she married Kate's father. That was kind of scandalous because she married below her station and was leaving London, leaving the country, and so there's kind of drama, a little bit uncomfortableness of her coming back. They're here to find Edwina a husband to marry well, and Anthony is also in search of a wife, we know this at the time, but going about it in a very kind of clinical way, very job interview style. And so Kate and Anthony meet each other on horseback, riding through the forest or whatever. But it's kind of an unofficial meeting. They don't get each other's names, but we get that little spark of attraction at the beginning. So when we finally get to the first ball of the season, Kate sees Anthony and follows him out, but overhears him talk about, again, this very, clinical approach to finding a wife. So she grows this immediate dislike for him of not only disliking what he said, but now definitely thinking, oh, he cannot marry my sister. So immediately enemies. Then at the second ball, the queen names Edwina the diamond of the season, and because Anthony is on this pursuit of marrying the best of the best to get his viscountess, he's like, oh, I'll marry her. Yeah, that's the side that goes about the plan. But then he realizes that Kate is her sister, which again kind of adds enemies to lovers to the plot, drama, tension, but also again I feel a little bit out of spite. Anthony's like, I'm gonna go after her just to mess with Kate, who's now an enemy. So Anthony starts courting Edwina. We get some really fun scenes of the poetry party that she throws with all the boys trying to woo her. We get the horse racing scene where we as a viewer and everyone around are seeing how similar Kate and Anthony are in their competitiveness, in their stubbornness, in just their spirits and their souls. But they're bickering, going toe-to-toe, more enemies moments. So then we get to Aubrey Hall, and in the Aubrey Hall episode, we learn of Edmund's death, the bee sting, all of that trauma for Anthony, and really see how that was a horrible point from him of having to step into a role as a parent at 18 for his entire family. We get the Pall Mall scene, which is so fun, and this is where I think you see, too, Kate fits into the Bridgerton family. She fits into that banter, that competitiveness, that funness, in a way that Edwina just doesn't. But Edwina kind of starts to develop a crush for Anthony, so again, it's complicated for Kate. All of these feelings go around. Daphne also notices the Kate and Anthony attraction and is like, what are you doing? It's obvious you guys love each other. So we get the bee scene, but nobody else is around to notice it. It's just between Kate and Anthony. And again, this kind of bonding moment for them where she really comforts him. We get them hunting together, more kind of like attraction. Anthony being confused of like, this girl annoys me so much, but I cannot keep my eyes off of her. So he kind of starts to fumble with his feelings and doesn't know what to do. So at the ball, Kate and Anthony are kind of being noticed by more people around them, by their mothers, especially by Lady Danbury, and they even almost kiss in privacy, but this is interrupted by Daphne. So I think because Anthony is fully like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've let my feelings and emotions take this hold of me, back to the plan, back to what I strictly decided to. And so with that, we end the episode with him proposing to Edwina, going along with his original plan of marrying the perfect woman. So then we get the kind of engagement time period. The wedding's being planned by the queen, which has an added pressure of this needs to follow through. This needs to be, a good event. Kate and Anthony obviously still yearning for each other, but refuse to admit their feelings. And again, butting heads. But Lady Danbury has this great moment where she tells Kate, basically, whatever you think of this marriage being bad for Edwina, a broken engagement would be worse for her and worse for her opportunities. So Kate kind of has to swallow all of her words and feelings, and now has to support the marriage, even though she obviously really doesn't want to. So there's a moment where the engagement is almost broken up, but Kate convinces Anthony to follow through, again, because she would do anything for her sister and wants to make sure that even though she doesn't want this match to happen, she would not want her sister to be ruined. So we finally get to the wedding. Daphne has a conversation with Anthony beforehand, talking about true love and just knowing when it's right and feeling those things. So when we literally get to the altar, Anthony is obviously, does not know what to do with his feelings. He's staring at Kate the whole time. They can't keep their eyes off of each other. Edwina finally sees their attraction, goes full runaway bride mode, calls off the wedding, and has a huge fight with Kate. But at the end of this episode, we also get Kate and Anthony kissing. So much drama going around. Love triangle. It is crazy. So then we get into the post-wedding drama where the Bridgertons and the Sharmas are really trying to show a united front to the town because it's kind of scandalous. Queen planned a wedding and it's now been called off. But they're like, no, it's a mutual decision. Everything's fine. Kate and Anthony still, again, obviously yearning for each other. And their families like, get it together, people. Very funny moments with that. And, you're sure thinking now, like, oh my gosh, just get together. The wedding's done. Figure it out. But I think Kate and Anthony feel so much guilt for hurting the people around them that they would never, ever, ever even consider going after what they want now. So then we get the Bridgerton Sharma ball, which again is tied in to them trying to post this united front, but no one shows up. So it's a really great family sequence of them just, being happy together. And it ends with a love scene between Kate and Anthony. Super steamy, super dramatic. We've been waiting up until this point for this. But afterwards, they're both upset. They're both like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Kate is riding off on a horse into the distance in a storm. Anthony's chasing after her. He's planning to propose, but Kate has a horrible accident. He saves her, but she's fully like in a coma now. So Kate finally wakes up. She's okay. Anthony is obviously triggered by all of his death trauma with this and just does not know where to place these feelings, but knows he cares for her. He tries to propose again, but Kate, thinking that he's just doing this out of his duty and not out of, genuine love for her, she denies it. But the sisters, Kate and Edwina, they finally make up. There's a final ball at the end of the season, and here Kate and Anthony finally are just like, screw it. Let them talk. Let's love. And so then they have happily ever after, and it is wonderful. So in the show, we also have some side plots going on, namely Eloise trying to figure out who Lady Whistledown is, and in that, becoming acquainted with one of the printmakers at the shops, develops a crush on this little boy, also is kind of exposed to kind of like radical feminist class ideas. Benedict, we get his storyline of just being the silliest art boy in the world, trying to be an artist, being comedic relief, being ridiculous, and we love him for it. And then with Featherington slash Penelope, so their new cousin has come to be Lord Featherington, and they're still kind of out of a lot of money, in debt. He turns out to be a con man, has a weird kind of relationship with the mom, but the mom brings it all together, very Kris Kardashian vibes of like, she works hard to keep the family right. And then Penn and Colin have this growing tension between them. Obviously, no, Penelope likes him. Colin has moments where it's like, is he seeing Penelope? But then goes again, time and time again, just ruin it and is like, I just see you as a friend, or, oh, I could never marry Penelope. But I think we're going to get more of them next season. Okay, so now I briefly want to go into analysis of Kate and Anthony, because I think understanding their characters really helps you understand their love and a lot of decisions that they make in the story. So first off with Kate, she knows the rules of the game, but doesn't feel obligated to follow them. So she understands all of the things that make a perfect, suitable wife. She's raised as Edwina to be that way, but because she doesn't see herself staying in London, she believes that she's going back to India. She also just doesn't really want to marry. She doesn't see herself being marriageable. She doesn't feel obligated to follow these rules, which is why I think she comes off kind of like brash, says what's on her mind, and, in a lot of ways acts like she could care less about these things and the characters around her. She's also resigned to kind of a life of loneliness. Again, she's talked about going back to India to be a governess and is really just focused on Edwina and Mary living comfortable lives and being okay, which I think if you really analyze this, Kate uses a lot of her tough exterior to cover up a lot of sadness to me. Because if you look at her character, Edwina is her only living blood relative. Both of her parents are dead, and yes, Mary is there as her stepmother, but I really think that Kate has kind of just accepted this loneliness in her life, and is trying to, kind of take it on, to not face the experience that she actually is kind of alone in the world, and that is a fear for her. And then last but not least, she would do anything for her sister. Very Angelica Schuyler. Even if you think in some moments of like, with the love triangle, that can be kind of complicated to understand, Kate would do anything for her sister, whether it is a detriment to herself, or those around her. Okay, now getting into Anthony. Our boy is overly logical at times. We definitely see this in the way he's looking for a wife, where it's all about hitting these things on his list rather than actually feeling things and looking for someone he cares about. He is a gentleman, which he says time and time again in the show. And I know there's been some critique online of like, you were about to kiss your fiance's sister. That's not very gentlemanly. But you have to really think about it in this sense. He's not a gentleman in the sense of how we would think about it today of like, oh, a nice guy. He's a gentleman in the sense that he has been raised of the genteel class with a very specific code of ethics and code of responsibilities for what it means to be a man. So yes, this can include having a mistress and him kind of sleeping around before marriage and maybe being ridiculous at times. But he believes so strongly in this controlling kind of like very specific way he's supposed to live that Kate, who tempts him, makes him want to act out of character, makes him want to not be a gentleman, is such a major force in his life. He also wants to compartmentalize everything and is really controlling. We see this a lot in season 1 of how, kind of controlling his of Daphne's life, but again, just wanting to kind of compartmentalize every part of his life, go according to plan, and make things work his way. And now so both of them together. And first I have to say, these two people for me are soulmates. And that's one thing that I love out of enemies to lovers romances, is that they think they're so different, they're butting heads all the time, but it's really because they are just a mirror looking back at the other person, reflecting all of their own interior flaws and conflicts. And they love each other because of it too. So one thing about Kate and Anthony, they're both competitive and stubborn. You see this a lot in the show. They also have the eldest sibling burden, even more so after the death of their parents, which causes them to fill this parental role themselves. A lot of that leads to kind of this controlling, domineering personality, but also a lot of, I think, trauma and lack of willing to go after what they want, because they feel this duty to their family. Also, these very big traumatic events in their lives, I think, cause them to feel a lot of helplessness. And so the way they cope with that is extreme control. With the way Anthony is so controlled about how picking out a perfect wife, and even the way Kate is so controlled in how Edwina is supposed to marry and raising her, and thinking that there's safety kind of in that control and safety for herself of planning everything out. Again, they feel this duty to their family / role over their personal desires. And one thing, I think they're both scared to love. Even in the love with each other, the reason why it's kind of angsty and enemies to lovers is this does not feel like a breath of fresh air love. Oh, I found the one. This is incredibly triggering on all of their traumas because it is forcing them to give up all of the control and all of the life and all of the systems that they've built around what they think their life is going to be to give into this love.
Okay, and now for the costuming. It would not be a video by me if I wasn't talking about fashion in some sort of way, and so then I have to talk about the costume design of this show.
Okay, so now to the costuming, which I just absolutely love in the show. So first, I love the color storytelling that they use. The Bridgertons are super coded as blue, and you see this really throughout the show with all of the siblings. And Kate kind of comes in with these lilacs, teals, turquoises, and shades of purples, all kind of fitting into that, whereas Edwina is very pink, pastel pink. And this is where I think you see visually Kate already fitting into the Bridgerton family. You can even see, like, literally in this promo poster, they literally look like they're the couple, and Edwina is just there in her pink, pretty dress. Now, with the Featheringtons, so I think the Featheringtons get the most flack online for their costuming because they're like, this is not historically accurate, this looks ridiculous, all these things. That is the point. That is the point of the story, in that the Featheringtons, I think, especially compared to the Bridgertons, are kind of reflecting this old money, new money vibe, in the sense that the Bridgertons are very established, classic family. The Featheringtons, we know behind the scenes, are in debt, are really struggling with money. So they almost go overboard with the extravagant accessories, fake flower details, crystals, all of those things to present this idea of extravagance. But you kind of see through it, and it kind of looks ridiculous just as they are. And then, of course, one of my favorite things for this season were the cultural elements brought in for Kate, Mary, and Edwina. You really see the Indian influence in their heritage and in their clothing, whether it's the jewelry used, the Indian silks used for some of the fabrics, and just all over throughout the show. I think it's really seamlessly weaved into their characters.
Alright, so let's get into what I loved about this season. So again, the costuming, specifically the cultural ties brought in with it, but just overall, I'm sure you've heard me say how much I love them all. And then again, the overall cultural aspects they brought in with the Sharma sisters and the Sheffields, between the costuming, the language usage, the music, certain scenes, like when they're doing the haldi ceremony before Edwina's wedding, the way they refer to each other as sisters, even the music, using for that scene as well, using like the Bridgerton instrumental version of Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, which is, again, such a smart reference to the show. And that's, to me, again, the writers, like, there's a lot of intent being put into the creation of this show and the characters. So the Bollywood movie that this song comes from is a family drama, essentially, about, two brothers, two sisters, brothers being of the higher status, girls being kind of lower status. It's forbidden love. It's him having to kind of choose duty, family honor, or his love. And really the overarching theme of that movie is family and family uniting. And so I think it's so smart that of all the options they had, they took that song to bring to the Bridgerton universe. Definitely music overall was a huge love of mine this season. We saw, again, from the very beginning of season 1, we saw them take these modern pop songs and do like little orchestral flair for the ballroom scenes, and I really loved what they did with this season 2 of bringing in more songs. I think some of my favorites were Sign of the Times, Diamonds, Material Girl, Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, and then also You Oughta Know. I think that was so great, and like the angst of that song being applied to like violins and orchestra, it makes my heart so happy. Okay, and one thing that I really love about the show, and you continue to see it this season, and this is something that is different from the book, is that this is an ensemble show. In the books we get the Bridgerton family and get these side characters that carry on throughout, but it's really focused on the main couple of that book. Whereas in the show, we get so many of these incredible side characters, and even that see you know, the Bridgerton family still living in their own ways and reacting to each other outside of this main couple that we're focusing on. And so that was just so fun. I love, oh my gosh, the Eloise and Benedict interactions, the Featheringtons, even though, you know, it's sometimes like, some of the plot annoyed me a little bit this year, but still, like, it's just, it's fun. It makes it a fully fleshed out world. It adds to the drama of the story. It just helps flesh out these characters as full individuals and not just kind of like side pieces to the story. And I really think that was necessary for what they're trying to do for the show, you know? Like, if it was a movie just recreating the books, then they could just create a singular movie following one couple and the side characters are part of that story. But for a TV show, we really need more, and we need these characters added in, or maybe the side characters being brought to life, and I really think you get that in the show versus the book. And then for what I didn't love, so definitely for me, I'm so back and forth. The love triangle, it was frustrating, as is the slow burn romance. It's frustrating, you know, that, but the frustration kind of leads to like the payoff of when you finally get there. And so I wish that they had worked a way to do it where it wasn't such an overt love triangle, because I don't like that Edwina started to like Anthony, and it made the sister relationship kind of rough. And that's one thing that you get in the books, is this clear love for each other as sisters. And even Kate, you know, in the show has this clear love for Edwina, and that's why she thinks she's, you know, making these decisions to protect her. But it kind of blew up in everybody's faces. So yeah, that sense, I didn't love the love triangle plot, but I also understand why they did it. And one thing that I think that this helped in the show is that then every character, those three main characters, they had more agency and they chose their fate, versus in the book where, you know, Kate and Anthony end up getting married because they are like, discovered in a compromising situation, and even Edwina is she's kind of a passive character in the books, versus in the show. I think Edwina's character is a lot stronger, and we do see her start as kind of this naive, kind of sweetheart character, kind of a little bit of a people pleaser, trying to do, again, what's right and marry well. And then she takes this stance and decides her fate and what she wants. And then also, you know, Kate and Anthony, they choose each other too. Even, I like too that even, you know, part of me, it was so frustrating of like, okay, the wedding's called off, now kiss, like make up and kiss, figure it out. But even then, that would have been so easy to just say, okay, the wedding's over, now we'll throw them together. They both made the active choice in the end to let go of their pride, let go of, you know, all of these preconceived notions they had for each other, for the lives that they thought they would live, for the roles they thought they had to play, and decided to love each other. And that's one thing that I think was really beautiful to come out of it all. One thing I didn't love too, in a change from the show to the book, which again, it kind of makes sense with like where the show ended up going, but I wish they had kept in Kate's fears, and then Anthony's fear of, well, not so much fear of death, but his own conception of his death being a big motivator in a lot of his life choices, because that is one thing that really bonds them in the book, that they both have this kind of view of their own mortality at a very young age, and then also these, you know, somewhat irrational or maybe like ridiculous fears to others that are rooted in very real traumas for them. And in the show, you kind of get, you know, their dad dying, Edwina and Kate's dad dying, as a plot tie between Edwina and Anthony, as like, oh, we both have this kind of similar thing. Whereas in the book, that's kind of Kate and Anthony's thing. And so I wish they had kept those in, because I think those are really some of the beautiful parts of their love story, of not only finding love with each other, but through that love kind of conquering these fears. And one thing too, I didn't love Mary in the show. In the books, Mary really from like day one is very much a supporter of Kate, loves Kate, wants Kate, you know, even find love for herself, and very much so sees her as her daughter just as much as she sees Edwina as her daughter. And Kate is the one that I think still kind of maybe has some apprehension, but even then sees Mary as her mother and as her mother figure. Whereas the changes in the show, I think that it probably makes sense because Kate is aged up a little bit in the show, so we can kind of presume that maybe Mary came to her later in life, whereas in the books, Mary became her stepmom when she was 3 years old. And then also with the whole background of like the Sheffields plot line of them kind of holding money over Mary and over the family, and her being kind of disgraced for marrying a merchant and leaving the country. In that sense, her show characterization of being, so uncomfortable and kind of like, to me quieter, and just less overt with her love and less overt with her, mothering as she is in the book. It makes sense for the changes they made in the show, but I still wish that they had kept some of that in there. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my hopes / predictions for season 3, which I know they've gotten renewed for season 3, I think through season 4, so I can't believe I had to wait for like a whole nother year for this, but I'm very excited. So first, to just give kind of general overview of book 3, which this is if they follow book 3, although some of the show writers, I think in some interviews, they've already stated that they are going to go out of order, which is kind of my first prediction. But just to give an overview of what season 3 would be if it is based on book 3, is that it would be following Benedict's love story with Sophie. That just essentially, to give basic plot, it's kind of a Cinderella story take in that Sophie is essentially like the illegitimate daughter of an earl who's now not being taken care of, but now living with basically her evil stepmother and then her 2 stepsisters who have turned her into a maid. And one night the Bridgertons are hosting a masquerade ball, and Benedict is there. He sees this beautiful masked girl, they kiss on a terrace or whatever, and then she runs away because she has to, get back. Pumpkin, all that. Clock strikes 12. Not really, but it's Cinderella. So then we do a time jump to like 2 years later. She's been kicked out of the stepmother's house, and he is kind of out of town, out of the town. And he essentially kind of stumbles upon her as a maid and saves her from being attacked, but he doesn't recognize that it's her. Because also with a lot of like kind of the hard stuff she's gone through the last 2 years, she's cut her hair, she's lost a lot of weight, and he gets this like feeling of familiarity, but doesn't recognize that it's this, masked girl that he was in love with all this time. And he does very much so still think about this woman of his dreams, and like, did she even exist? I've never been able to find her. So then we get them for a week, staying at like a cottage house, and they kind of slowly fall in love with each other. Sophie knows that it's him. She knows that it's Benedict, but she doesn't want to out her real personality for some of her own fears around that. But they're slowly kind of falling in love together. So then eventually he takes her back to his family's house and tries to get her a job at his mother's house as a maid to keep her around. But also offers to have her be his mistress because he's in love with her, kind of. He doesn't realize that he thinks he's in love with the masquerade woman, still not realizing they're the same person. The book is literally titled An Offer from a Gentleman, and the offer is to be his mistress. So there's this point of contention of she doesn't want to be his mistress because her mom was a mistress, and she doesn't want, to have illegitimate children, all of her traumas around that. But eventually they work it all out. They decide to marry and fall in love. So I think that book to show, I would be happy to see some rewrites on this story. One, in the books that's interesting is when I first read it, I really loved them. I loved Sophie and Benedict. I read it again recently, and I'll be honest, some of the class differences and power dynamic with that made me a little uncomfortable, because at times Benedict is kind of pushy and like, you have no choice but to be my mistress. Like it's either that or, be a maid for the rest of your life. But also I'm still in love with this other imaginary girl in my mind who is you, but the reason I won't marry you is because I'm always going to hold a torch for the other girl. and I did love, the way that I think Sophie is in this society, in this world, as a woman, as a poor woman, as an illegitimate woman. She is kind of powerless, and I don't think that Benedict really gives a lot of respect to that situation. So I could see a lot of rewrites happening with this, and I think that's okay too. Even if they keep the premise of like the Cinderella story plotline, we've seen so many Cinderella adaptations that they could do a ton of different things with that baseline of the story, or do something entirely new. Because again, Cinderella's been done over and over again. I could see them doing something different for his love story. That's also to say, if they follow that with Benedict, because I know we've talked about it online and seen a lot of things, is that Benedict is kind of queer coded in the show. I don't know, it's very interesting, and they lean back a little bit from it, I think, this season, but I am interested to see where they go with it. Also, show Benedict versus book Benedict is very different. It isn't really until we get to his book that we even learn that he enjoys art, and it's kind of like a secret thing, versus, in the book, he's fully going to art school, wants to be a little artist boy. So I'm interested to see what they do. However, I'm making the prediction that I think season 3, and I think an interview already kind of like hinted at this a little bit, is going to follow Penelope and Colin. I think because in season 1, season 2, they've already built up a lot of that, especially with how season 2 ended, with his whole thing of saying, oh, I could never court Penelope Featherington, which is said in the books, but it's said amongst family. It's not like made in a jokey way. And also in the books, Penelope like stands up for herself. And so I could see in season 3 them following the Penelope Colin love story. I think Penelope's gonna probably have a great moment of standing up for herself, speaking her mind. We get so much of like her sassiness in the former Lady Whistledown, but I really want to see her, kind of speak her mind to Colin and be like, I am a woman and you have just looked me over, and you're not going to do it anymore. And I think that that could kind of kick Colin into gear. So yeah, I kind of see things, I think at first getting worse for Penelope. As we know, this past season did not really end well with her, between Eloise and their friendship. I could see things, getting there. She's still kind of in financial stress with her family. Lady Whistledown is still, there's a lot of pressure from the Queen to discover her. And people are just mean to her. People are really mean to her. So I can see that kind of continuing, but then almost in response to that, she has this moment where she just like says, no, like, I'm done with this and I'm going to stand up for myself. So I'd love to see that. I would love to see kind of a tougher, more externally tough Penelope, and Colin just eating it all up. Also, I'm so excited. Simone Ashley and Jonathan Bailey, I think, have both already confirmed that they will be on for season 3, and that there will be Kate and Anthony marriage scenes. So that's one thing, in that we don't get that in season 2, but we got it in the book. I really think that they're going to be a much more central plot line, or we're going to get a lot more screen time with them in their married life, which I would love to see. And then finally, my guess of the end of season 3 and then tying it into the Benedict plot line, I think that we could see possibly a cliffhanger ending, or where, Penelope and Colin, they get married at the end, they're happy, la da da. Then there's a masquerade ball, final episode. Which one? Costumes. I'm so excited. This is why I want this to stay in the story, because I know it will be amazing. And then season 3 ends with Benedict meeting Sophie and her running away into the night, and that being kind of the ending of the story. And that would be a good setup too, because there is a time jump between when he first meets her and then meets her later down the line. And so having that time pass over, in between the 2 seasons, I think could work really well, and then set up his love story for season 4. So thank you so much for watching. Comment your thoughts down below. Let's talk about all things Bridgerton. Give me book recommendations, anything. And subscribe and stay tuned. Next week I'm going to be posting another sewing tutorial video. So yeah. So yeah, this is for the Bridgerton casting directors. I've got the look. I can fake an accent. Give me a call. But thank you for watching, everybody.